Across Japan, more people than ever are living alone, not as a temporary phase, but as a growing reality shaped by deeper social, economic, and cultural shifts that are quietly transforming everyday life. In a country long defined by community and shared living, this shift raises a powerful and unsettling question about the direction society is moving toward. This is not simply about personal choice or modern lifestyle preferences, but a reflection of something deeper unfolding beneath the surface, where independence is increasing while connection is gradually fading in ways that are not always immediately visible. What appears normal on the outside may be masking a more complex and evolving reality within the structure of society itself. In cities like New York and London, living alone is often associated with freedom, opportunity, and personal development, where individuals choose independence as a stage of life before forming long-term relationships or families. It is seen as a temporary experience, shaped by ambition, mobility, and the flexibility of modern urban living environments. But in Japan, the same pattern is beginning to carry a different meaning entirely, where living alone is no longer just a phase, but an increasingly permanent condition shaped by demographic shifts, cultural change, and evolving priorities. What looks similar on the surface begins to reveal a deeper contrast when examined more closely. Japan's remarkable life expectancy has quietly reshaped the structure of everyday life, allowing more people to live longer than ever before while also increasing the likelihood that one partner will outlive the other. Over time, this natural imbalance creates a growing number of individuals who find themselves living alone in later years. What begins as a shared journey gradually shifts into a solitary experience, not through sudden change, but through the slow passage of time that separates lives once closely connected. In this quiet transition, companionship fades, leaving behind a new reality defined not by choice, but by circumstance and longevity. As years pass, the absence within these homes becomes more noticeable, not through noise, but through silence that settles into routines once shared between two people. Daily life continues, yet the emotional rhythm changes, creating a subtle but lasting shift in how space is experienced and understood. At the same time, younger generations continue to move toward opportunity, often relocating to cities like Tokyo in search of work and modern lifestyles. This movement, while necessary for progress, quietly separates families, leaving older members behind in homes that no longer reflect the lives they once held. Distance becomes more than physical, gradually transforming relationships that were once immediate into ones defined by occasional visits and distant communication. In this evolving structure, living alone becomes not just a stage of life, but an increasingly common outcome shaped by changing priorities and movement. Over time, entire neighborhoods begin to reflect this pattern, where homes remain occupied, yet the sense of shared life within them slowly fades. What was once a network of families becomes a collection of individuals, each living within their own space, connected by proximity but separated by experience. This shift does not happen suddenly, but unfolds gradually, making it less visible yet deeply significant in its impact on daily life. It is within this quiet transformation that the reality of living alone begins to take shape, grounded in time, movement, and the natural course of life. As Japan continues to age, this pattern becomes more pronounced, revealing a future where living alone is not an exception, but a defining feature of society. What begins with longevity ultimately reshapes how life is lived, experienced, and shared across generations. In Japan, fewer young people are choosing to marry, influenced by rising living costs, demanding careers, and shifting personal priorities that redefine what a fulfilling life should look like. Marriage is no longer viewed as a necessary milestone, but as an option increasingly delayed or quietly set aside. This gradual shift reflects a deeper change in how relationships are perceived, where long-term commitment is no longer assumed, but carefully weighed against personal stability and independence. Over time, the absence of marriage becomes less noticeable individually, yet collectively reshapes the structure of society in profound and lasting ways. Financial pressure plays a significant role, as the cost of building a family continues to rise alongside uncertain job security and evolving economic conditions. For many, Maintaining independence feels more manageable than taking on responsibilities that require long-term financial and emotional investment. Career focus also contributes to this pattern, as individuals dedicate more time and energy toward professional growth, leaving limited space for developing relationships. What begins as ambition gradually influences lifestyle, where time becomes structured around work rather than shared personal experiences. In cities like London and New York, many people delay marriage while pursuing careers and personal goals, yet long-term partnerships often remain a common outcome over time. In these environments, independence is typically a phase that transitions into shared living and family life. In Japan, however, the pattern is beginning to unfold differently, where delay increasingly shifts into permanence rather than transition. Living alone is no longer simply a step along the way, but an endpoint that reflects changing values and a redefinition of what stability and fulfillment mean. As fewer people choose marriage, the traditional pathway that once connected individuals into families begins to weaken, creating a new social structure centered more on individuals than households. This quiet transformation unfolds gradually, yet carries long-term implications for how society organizes itself. What emerges is not a sudden decline, but a steady reorientation of life choices, where independence takes precedence over tradition. In this evolving landscape, living alone becomes less of an exception and more of a reflection of a society redefining its future. Across Japan, the financial structure of modern life has quietly shifted, making long-term commitments increasingly difficult to sustain under rising costs and uncertain stability. What once felt achievable now requires careful calculation, as the balance between income, security, and future planning becomes more fragile over time. For many individuals, the idea of building a family is no longer guided by tradition alone, but shaped by economic realities that demand caution and restraint. Decisions that once followed a familiar path are now reconsidered, as financial pressure begins to influence not just choices, but entire life directions. Stable employment, once a defining feature of Japan's economy, has gradually become less predictable, introducing a sense of uncertainty into long-term planning. This shift changes how people approach commitment, where the future feels less guaranteed and more dependent on maintaining individual stability rather than shared responsibility. As this uncertainty grows, the cost of raising a family becomes a central concern, extending beyond basic needs into education, housing, and long-term care. What appears manageable at first begins to expand into a sustained financial obligation that many feel unprepared to carry. Over time, practicality begins to take precedence over aspiration, guiding individuals toward choices that feel more secure and controllable. Living alone, in this context, becomes less about preference and more about navigating a system where independence offers greater financial clarity. This shift does not occur abruptly, but develops gradually as small decisions accumulate, each shaped by the need to remain stable in an increasingly demanding environment. The result is a lifestyle that prioritizes manageability, where simplicity replaces complexity in daily living. As independence becomes more closely tied to financial survival, the idea of shared living begins to lose its traditional appeal. What once symbolized connection and growth now carries added risk, making solitude feel like a more predictable and sustainable path forward. In this evolving landscape, economic pressure quietly reshapes the structure of society, influencing how people live, connect, and plan for the future. Living alone emerges not as an isolated outcome, but as a reflection of deeper forces redefining stability in modern Japan. Across Japan, work has become more than a responsibility, shaping daily life through long hours and expectations that extend far beyond the office. Over time, this structure quietly reduces the space available for relationships, as personal life is gradually compressed between obligations and routines that rarely slow down. For many individuals, the energy required to maintain social connections begins to fade under the weight of continuous demands and structured schedules. What starts as dedication slowly evolves into distance, where time once shared with others becomes absorbed by responsibilities that leave little room for emotional connection. Daily routines settle into patterns that prioritize efficiency and performance, often at the expense of personal interaction and meaningful engagement. As these patterns repeat, they reinforce a lifestyle where solitude becomes not intentional, but a natural consequence of how time is allocated. Moments that could foster connection are frequently replaced by exhaustion, where the end of the day brings recovery rather than social engagement. In this quiet cycle, relationships are not actively abandoned, but gradually weakened by the absence of time and sustained attention. In cities like London and New York, work remains demanding, yet there is a growing emphasis on balancing professional life with personal well-being and social connection. Efforts to protect personal time create space where relationships can still develop alongside career ambitions. Within Japan, however, the balance often shifts in a different direction, where work increasingly defines the structure of life itself. Rather than supporting personal experiences, it begins to replace them, quietly reshaping how individuals interact, connect, and spend their time. As this dynamic continues, the boundary between professional and personal life becomes less distinct, blending into a routine where work takes priority by default. Over time, this leaves limited opportunity for relationships to form, grow, or sustain themselves in meaningful ways. In this environment, living alone emerges not as a deliberate preference, but as an outcome shaped by how life is organized around work. What remains is a pattern where solitude is not chosen directly, but formed gradually through the absence of time for connection. In dense urban centers like Tokyo, daily life is structured around efficiency, speed, and independence, shaping routines that naturally support individual living. Small apartments, compact spaces, and streamlined systems quietly reinforce a lifestyle where everything is designed to function seamlessly for one person. From transportation networks to convenience stores, every aspect of the environment is built to accommodate individuals moving through the city alone. This design does not isolate people directly, but creates a rhythm where independence feels natural, practical, and increasingly sufficient for everyday living. What begins as convenience gradually evolves into expectation, where living alone is not questioned but accepted as a normal part of urban life. The city itself adapts to this pattern, offering solutions that make solitude easier to sustain without disruption or discomfort. As routines become more individualized, shared experiences slowly diminish, replaced by systems that prioritize speed and personal efficiency. Over time, this quiet shift reduces the need for coordination with others, reinforcing a lifestyle where independence becomes the default rather than the exception. Daily interactions remain present, yet often brief and functional, lacking the depth that builds lasting connection over time. In this environment, social contact exists, but it rarely develops into something sustained, allowing solitude to persist even within crowded spaces. The pace of city life further shapes this experience, where movement is constant and time is tightly managed around personal schedules. Within this structure, living alone becomes easier to maintain, as the environment continuously supports individual control over time and space. Gradually, the distinction between choice and adaptation begins to blur as individuals settle into patterns that feel both convenient and necessary. What once might have been temporary becomes long-term, shaped by an environment that consistently reinforces independence. In this setting, urban design does more than support daily life. It quietly influences how people connect, live, and experience space. Living alone emerges not as an isolated decision, but as a natural outcome of a city built to serve individuals above all else. For a growing generation, the meaning of a fulfilling life is being quietly redefined, moving away from traditional expectations toward values centered on personal freedom, space, and independence. What once guided life decisions begins to loosen, allowing new priorities to take shape without the pressure of established norms. Over time, these changing values reshape how individuals view relationships, where commitment is no longer assumed but carefully considered within a broader sense of personal direction. The idea of building a life alone becomes less unconventional, gradually settling into a choice that feels both valid and complete. What begins as a shift in mindset slowly expands into lifestyle, influencing how people organize their time, goals, and emotional investments. As this perspective spreads, shared living is no longer the default path, but one option among many in a landscape defined by individual choice. Generational change deepens this transformation as younger individuals grow up with different expectations shaped by modern experiences and evolving cultural narratives. The influence of tradition remains present, yet its role becomes less defining in determining how life is ultimately lived. In cities like London and New York, independence is often experienced as a stage of life, a period of personal growth before transitioning into long-term relationships or family structures. It is seen as temporary, shaped by mobility, exploration, and evolving personal goals. Within Japan, however, independence is increasingly taking on a different meaning, extending beyond a phase into something more permanent and defining. Living alone is no longer simply part of a journey, but an endpoint that reflects a deeper cultural shift in how fulfillment is understood. As this shift continues, the balance between tradition and modern identity begins to tilt, creating space for new ways of living that prioritize individual experience over collective expectation. What once felt unconventional becomes normalized, gradually redefining the boundaries of social structure. In this evolving landscape, living alone becomes more than a practical outcome. It becomes a reflection of changing values and long-term identity. The idea of solitude transforms from a temporary condition into a stable and accepted way of life within a shifting cultural framework. In densely populated environments, millions of people move through shared spaces each day, yet many experience a growing sense of isolation that is not immediately visible. The presence of others no longer guarantees connection, as interaction becomes more limited, brief, and often detached from deeper engagement. Daily life continues with constant movement and activity, but meaningful interaction gradually becomes less frequent within structured routines. Over time, individuals adapt to this rhythm, where independence is maintained while emotional connection becomes less central to everyday experience. Digital communication begins to replace face-to-face interaction, offering convenience while subtly altering how relationships are formed and maintained. Messages become more common than conversations, and connection shifts into a space that is accessible yet often less personal and emotionally engaging. As this shift continues, the need for physical presence in relationships becomes less immediate, allowing individuals to navigate life with fewer direct interactions. What feels efficient in the moment gradually reshapes expectations, where connection is no longer constant but accessed when necessary. Over time, social interaction becomes more selective, shaped by convenience rather than routine or shared proximity. The frequency of casual encounters decreases, and with it, the small moments that often build familiarity, trust, and a sense of belonging within everyday life. This gradual reduction does not appear dramatic, but its effects accumulate quietly, influencing how individuals experience their surroundings and relationships. The absence of regular interaction creates a space where solitude becomes easier to maintain without immediate awareness of its impact. In this environment, connection shifts from being an essential part of daily life to an optional element that can be engaged or avoided. As this pattern settles, individuals become more accustomed to navigating routines independently, without the consistent presence of others. The city remains active and full, yet the experience within it becomes increasingly individual, shaped by routines that prioritize efficiency over interaction. Within this quiet transformation, isolation emerges not from absence, but from a gradual change in how connection is lived and understood. Living alone offers independence and control, allowing individuals to shape their routines without compromise or external obligation. Yet beneath this freedom, subtle emotional and social consequences begin to form, often unnoticed at first, gradually influencing how people experience connection, support, and a sense of belonging over time. What appears stable on the surface can slowly shift as the absence of regular interaction creates emotional distance that is difficult to measure in daily life. Over time, this quiet separation begins to affect well-being, shaping how individuals process stress, relationships, and personal challenges without consistent external support. Loneliness does not always present itself immediately, but develops gradually as shared experiences become less frequent and emotional exchanges become limited. In this subtle progression, individuals may continue their routines unchanged, while an underlying sense of isolation quietly grows beneath the structure of everyday life. Mental health challenges can emerge within this environment, influenced by the lack of consistent social interaction and emotional reinforcement. Without regular connection, the ability to share burdens or seek reassurance becomes reduced, leaving individuals to navigate complex experiences independently over extended periods. As time passes, the reality of aging alone becomes more pronounced, particularly as physical and emotional needs evolve. Support systems that once existed through family or shared living arrangements may no longer be immediately accessible, creating additional layers of vulnerability that develop slowly over time. These changes do not occur suddenly, but accumulate through small shifts that gradually reshape daily experience and long-term well-being. Because they develop quietly, they are often overlooked until their effects become more deeply embedded in how individuals live and interact with their environment. Over time, independence begins to carry a different meaning, where freedom is balanced by the responsibility of managing life without consistent support. What once felt empowering may gradually require greater emotional resilience as individuals adapt to navigating challenges on their own. In this evolving reality, the hidden consequences of living alone reveal themselves not through dramatic change, but through steady transformation. The impact is subtle yet profound, shaping how individuals experience life, connection, and the passage of time within an increasingly solitary framework. Looking ahead, the number of single-person households is expected to continue rising across Japan, reflecting patterns that have already begun to reshape how people live and interact. This steady growth suggests a future where living alone becomes not an exception, but a dominant social structure. As this trend advances, society gradually adapts through changes in housing, services, and daily systems designed to support independent living. What once centered around families begins to shift toward individuals, altering how communities are organized and how support is distributed across different stages of life. The pace of this transformation raises important questions about long-term sustainability, particularly in areas such as care, social connection, and shared responsibility. Systems built for collective living may face increasing pressure as the number of individuals navigating life alone continues to expand over time. Communities themselves may begin to evolve, redefining connection beyond traditional family structures and exploring new forms of interaction and support. What emerges could reshape the meaning of belonging, as relationships are formed through different networks rather than shared households. In this unfolding future, the central question remains not just how people will live, but how they will connect within an increasingly individual landscape. The answer will shape not only daily life, but the broader direction of society as it adapts to a new way of being. Japan's story may feel unique, yet it reflects patterns that are quietly emerging in other parts of the world, where independence is rising alongside subtle shifts in how people connect and live. What is unfolding here offers a glimpse into changes that could shape societies far beyond its borders. As lifestyles continue to evolve, the balance between independence and connection becomes more complex, raising questions about how communities will adapt in the years ahead. The future may not be defined by isolation, but by how well societies learn to reconnect within new ways of living. This is Asia Within, where we explore the patterns, people, and quiet transformations shaping the world around us.